Oh, yeah. Today is going to be a beautiful day. Look, I'm in slow motion. You guys, I'm having technical issues today, but welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling. My name is Catherine Nunez, and I am the host of the show, The Art of Inspired Selling. In case you've never seen it, welcome. It's a long show format where I bring to you the business owner, the solopreneur, the side hustler, the personal brand, whatever you want to call yourself. If you're in business today, sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we need some additional information to get us from A to B. And what I've done is I look for experts that can come on the show and can help you get unstuck, right? Because we want to inspire you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. And today's guest will not disappoint. Everybody needs to be able to tell their story. Story is so important. Story is important in conversation. Story is old in the hills, right? Everybody tells a story. When you write on your social media, the most engaged posts will have told a story, how that hero went from A to B. So that is you today. And I'm going to bring on to the stage Mike Ganino. He is a storytelling and communication expert. Excuse me, boy, that expert who hosts the Mic Drop Moment podcast. He has been named a top 10 public speaking coach by Yahoo Finance and California's best speaking and communication coach by Corporate Vision magazine. He is an author, former executive producer for TEDxCambridge, and has been named the top 30 speaker by Global Guru. He teaches storytelling, presence, and public speaking to some of the biggest names and brands. He is a trained actor and coach from the world famous Second City, Improv Olympics, and Upright Citizens Brigade. In addition to his track record as an executive in the hotel, restaurant, retail, and tech industries, Mike worked with organizations like Disney, American Century Investments, American Marketing Associates, and UCLA. So I am going to welcome him to the stage now.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's hope I don't have a sloth moment. If I start looking like a sloth, or what is the movie when the
The
guy's like them?
Matrix.
If I start looking matrixes, you guys just ignore me. I'm just gonna break into dance over here, and then you'll know that it's tech. It's just not. It's not me. It just happens.
I've never been interviewed by someone in the Matrix, so I am quite honored for that to happen. So I'm here for it. I'm
You
here
know,
for it.
everybody's got to have a unique value proposition. Just saying.
There you go, and that is it. So voila.
So, welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling. I'm so happy to have you. I have you here. I love you. We're on Facebook together now. I love your little girl. She's gorgeous,
Thank
by the
you.
way, right? And the ticket on the show is that you have to tell us what inspires you. So, we're all salespeople. People don't like to think it, but if you're in business, you're a salesperson, right? You should be spending a lot of time selling and getting visible, which is what you do as well, in the press, all over. But what inspires you to wake up in the morning, get those 2 feet firmly planted on the floor? Tell me a little bit. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have a book? Do you have a person? What inspires you?
I mean, my daughter, as you know, is toddler phase, so she's like 1.5, and so usually it's her crying and wanting to get out of bed that inspires me to get out of bed, because you kind of, I guess you don't have to, but you should probably get up and take care of that. So 4 mornings a week it's that, and then 3 mornings a week I wake up at 5 a.m. to go work out with a personal trainer. I finally just had to like succumb, because I was like, I'm just not going to get up early and do this on my own unless I'm paying someone to like be there for me.
Isn't that sad? I
You
I
know,
resonate with that.
but luckily I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. And so 3 days a week, Edgar Rodriguez gets me motivated to get out of
Ooh.
bed, and 4 days a week, it's my daughter who gets me out of bed and says, let's get this day going. So I start 3 days a week with like burpees, and 4 days a week with sweet little kisses. So I'll take it. I'll take it.
For it transitioned from burping to burpees,
Yeah, it did. It did.
So as you guys join us, please, You're welcome to chat. Restream. If you're on my business page, I can see what you're saying. If you're not, I can't see what you're saying. So we could get some other channels going here. I guess you have to give, I don't know, Restream changed. I used to see everybody all the time. Now I'm not seeing you. So if we're not answering your questions, we will go back and make sure all of your questions are answered. If you are on my email list, which why wouldn't you be on my email list? You were emailed out a workbook that goes along with what Mike's going to talk about today. If you didn't get a copy of it, reach out to me and we'll make sure you have it. It will also show up in the show notes, unless you're on LinkedIn, because they limited the number of characters that I can give you. So that's the housekeeping for the show today. But Mike, what do you have for us today? What are we going to talk about besides storytelling? And where are you coming from?
Yeah, so I mean, today I thought we would talk about storytelling and where it falls, and specifically maybe for people that are in selling situations. So maybe a little less of like storytelling to like entertain and wow the audience, although the best salespeople should be doing that as well. But really, like, how do you use storytelling in your business if you're an entrepreneur? And then also some of the like beyond the basic stuff. So like, what do we get wrong so often? There's so many people out there like talking about storytelling. So what are we missing? I come from the world of entertainment and hospitality. I was working in the restaurant industry and in and theater, writing, producing, directing, acting in shows. And so my take on this is a little bit different, I think, than some other folks who come from like I don't know, this is the way your brain works kind of thing. I don't know why the brain works that way. I'm just here to say I know what makes people laugh, cry, and pay attention to you. So let's do more of that. And that's what I thought we'd do today.
Perfect.
And where am I coming from? I'm here in Los Angeles, California. So just up a short little train ride from you, Catherine. I'm just not too far.
We should meet halfway sometime. I think,
love it.
You know, that would be so much fun. Have a cocktail and, you know, a train ride for the day. Yes. And so story is so important. And as trained sales representatives, as you may or may not know, my background is in corporate sales. I had over 30 years of corporate sales, and we were never given any training in storytelling. I know that I could command the attention of a room sometimes when I started to talk, and I look like, oh my God, all the eyeballs are on me, right? You get on stage. But if I could have delivered my product's information with a mindset of knowing that there's a story, there's actually a structure for how I should be delivering that, I feel I would have been a more effective sales representative. And thank goodness we have you today to give us some structure and to talk about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. There's so many, I feel fortunate that I get to live in the world of public speaking, presentation, and storytelling, because it really is, I think, obviously I'm a little biased, but I think it really is the golden ticket for so many professionals. I work with a lot of founders of startup companies here in LA, helping them to really galvanize their story, be able to tell it, figure out how to go onto podcasts, onto shows like this one, and talk about what they do so that people say, oh, that's so interesting, I got to look it up, or I want to go work there. By the way, that's another reason we should be using stories as entrepreneurs and leaders. And so it really is the ability to share your ideas so that other people lean in, share your ideas, package them, deliver them, show up with presence to talk to a camera, which, I mean, everyone is doing these days. Everyone became a on-air personality a couple of years ago. And so that skill set, I really believe, is the one. Obviously, if you're in finance, you need to know finance. Obviously, if you're in, product development, you need to know that. But outside of that, on top of all of those skills, I really believe that presentation skills, stage presence, structuring content, putting stories together is the thing that the best leaders, that the best sales professionals, that the best people in their fields have to absolutely know how to do, or else your ideas aren't going to go anywhere.
Well, when we think about, I don't talk politics, but when we think even about to our leaders, right? Those speakers, those people that can pull you in and emotionally connect to you, those people go down in the books. And then the people that didn't tell very good stories and didn't articulate very well, they go down in the books for other things, right?
Sure.
Not for being this beautiful presence, which is great. We're not talking about politics, though, but I just had this thought about the best speakers that could hold your attention.
Yeah.
That was a differentiator.
We saw this, like, I don't know if like democratization of that with YouTube and TEDx. If you think about it,
Mhm.
before the days of YouTube and TEDx specifically, which if you look at it, they kind of happened around the same time when TEDx blew up. It was around much earlier, but it didn't really blow up, the TED events, until YouTube. And before that, in the 90s and before, in the early 2000s and before, if someone was going to be a speaker or someone was going to be known for sharing their ideas, it was this long, arduous path of putting a book together, having a program, getting your videos onto VHS and mailing it to people. There was this barrier of entry. And I really think that with YouTube and TED specifically, for the first time, public speakers became rock stars. People who could present their ideas became rock stars. And we'd never really seen that before. That's never happened where someone gave a talk, it went viral, and then they got a book deal.
Yeah.
That happened only because of YouTube and TED. And so I think that we're seeing that seep into more of our work as sales leaders, as sales professionals, that as entrepreneurs, that the expectation of being able to turn on a camera and talk to people on the other side of it, the ability to stand up in front of a room and share your ideas, to sit across from someone in a coffee shop and clearly, logically lay out something that's interesting, intriguing, and helpful to them. I think that's just a barrier. That's just what is required to succeed.
And we call that table stakes.
Table stakes. I love that. Yes.
That's the entry level that you have. Like, who cares about anything else? Like, that's an expectation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For you. So I just want to welcome people. We have some people on Twitch today, and then also following us on Facebook. So, and I can't see LinkedIn. So if you're there, we're speaking to you.
I think this is my first hello Twitch. This is my first time ever being on Twitch, by the way. I feel very hip and young and cool
very
right
gamey,
now.
right?
Yeah.
I'm very gamey today. Yes,
I need like the Britney Spears headset, right? Don't they wear those headsets?
Yeah, I mean, they wear a lot of things and they sit in their messy room and they make millions of dollars
I love it.
broadcasting from their room.
Good for them.
Cheers to you guys.
Good for them.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So take us through what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to see if I can open up another file without going into the matrix mode, so that I can drop the link to where people can find you later on, as well as the workbook that we're going to talk about.
Cool.
So you go while I'm going to do my thing over here and make sure that I can deliver to you guys.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the document that I shared, which you could get here through Catherine in the show notes, you can also grab it on my website if you pop over there, is these 5 stories that I think are fundamental, whether you are a leader, whether you're a sales professional, whatever the case is, these are the 5 stories that you should be able to tell. And there are plenty others that you want to be able to tell, but these are the 5 that I think are going to come up again and again in your process, whether you're raising funds, whether you're selling directly to clients, whether you're presenting in a webinar type thing. These are the 5 that you really need to be able to tell. And in this workbook, we guide you through a bunch of prompts to help you get them. Because that's one of the big challenges, Catherine, that people say is, I don't have any stories. I don't know any stories. I don't know what to say. So there's, I think, like 50, 60, 70, 80 prompts in there for each of these 5 kinds of stories that will help to trigger your brain. I actually had someone who was someone in an audience that I spoke to, and then they used it with their son to help him write his college admissions letter that you have to write, the essay to get into college. They used these questions and these prompts to help him get into his number 1 school. So shout out to Lisa and her son out there. So these are the 5 stories we got to tell. First is who, then why, then where, then how, and unspoken thoughts. Now, if you've been around the world before a little bit of days, you would know, like, okay, who, why, when, where. This all sounds familiar. We did this, we learned this way back when we were in school. And so when I talk about your who story, what I'm really talking about here is the who you are. Okay. So this is maybe on your about page. I see all the time about pages that I want to go give a little bit of love to help bring them out of being this kind of chronological version of in 2017, we started a business and then we opened this one and that one. That's not a story. We often think that
I agree.
Chronological happenings are a story, but they're not. They're just chronological happenings. Okay. So in this who section, what we're talking about are telling us stories that help us connect to who you are, why this is interesting to you. And this might be different, by the way. If you're a salesperson out there, this might be different for you versus your company and the product that you offer. These might be slightly different. They might be the same. I don't know. You'll do the work in the workbook to kind of sort through that. But the idea is that you are able to answer the question of who are you, what are you about, with a story that helps us understand that. Anytime that you find yourself kind of asserting what's true and saying, this is who I am, you know you're in dangerous territory. What you should be doing is telling us a story that the audience then says, wow, let me tell you who she is because of what I just heard in that story. So we don't need to give them the moral of the story, but we should put the story together in a way that gets them to say, wow, I really understand who you are. I'm connected to you now. There's something about it. And that's why for every audience, it might be a little bit different. You might have 5 or 6 different folks that you're speaking to in a day. And the version of your who story that you tell could be slightly different, because what we're seeking to do with the who story is find a commonality we can connect with, to find something with them where they say, oh, okay, this person is just like me. They figured this out. So that's what we're really looking for when we say the who story. Now, when we talk about the why story, that's the second one of this. The why story is all about, why are you here? Why are you maybe here right in front of me right now, maybe here in general offering this product and service, but why are you here? Why do you do what you do? And what I always encourage people to look for in this moment is the WTF moment. And I think we're going to keep this PG because it's over on LinkedIn and people are working over there. So I'll call it the what the friction moment. What the friction moment. What was the time that you said there's got to be a better way? There's got to be something else. If you are a sales professional in an organization, then this may not be the founding of the company that you're telling the story of. If you're the founder, then you might use why we started this business. But it could be, why did you show up and start working for this organization? I think sometimes sales professionals, and I've trained thousands at this point on this skill set, I think we're scared sometimes to talk about ourselves. We're scared to, and warranted. Talking about ourselves shouldn't be, you shouldn't be saying like, last night I was having a great cocktail down at the hotel lobby. We don't want that. But we do want to understand, why do you work for this company? Why do you do what you do? What did you see that you said, wow, there's got to be another way to do this? I used to work with a great organization called Chow Now. They do like online ordering for restaurants. So they work with
I'm
them to
back.
help them do that.
Woo!
You're here. I thought you were just highlighting me or something. I thought it was like great production value.
No, I was in sloth mode. I'm like, well, nobody's going to watch me over
There
here
we
in
go.
Matrix. Sorry to
No
interrupt
worries.
you guys. It's not about me.
So in this organization where they were selling directly to these local restaurants, we would encourage the sales reps to think of their own why story of why they work with this. What was the moment when they realized what was happening? A lot of them ended up being people that maybe had family in the restaurant industry. Maybe they had worked in the industry. Maybe they had a favorite local restaurant that they didn't want to not succeed. And so yes, you should know the story of the company, why it was started. What was the reason that the founder said, WTF, we got to solve this. This is a problem. But also having your own to share is really, really impactful in so many cases. Why are you actually here in front of me talking about this? Why does this matter to you? Again, the more that can kind of feel customized and be something that the audience that you're speaking to, the sales, sales prospect that's in front of you, the better chance you have of using that to connect. But overall, if you could be honest with it, you have a really great chance to build trust there, to build empathy with them.
Yeah.
So those are the first two.
And a lot of people, especially in my background, I was in healthcare and I sold a commoditized service.
Yeah.
And that's really how I got my start. Was I was selling a commoditized service. And so how do you differentiate yourself in that? You develop your personal brand, you develop your personal stories. Yep. So it's so very important, which is why I do what I do today. That's why I help people build their personal brand, and because nobody can take that away from you. Right. And nobody can take your stories. But yeah. All right. And now the workbook's up in the link. So if you guys need it there, it's there. So keep going.
And it's true about the idea of having your personal brand. Your personal brand I think so many people think it's about the colors and the fonts and the picture that they picked for their LinkedIn profile, but it's really about the stories we tell about each other. That version of branding is the old school branding where we were literally like branding the side of a cow with our logo.
Yes.
But today, we are the stories we tell and the stories people tell about us. So let's make sure we have some good ones. So those are the first two I think you really need to nail. Who am I? Why am I here? Those are also critical, by the way, if you're a sales professional who's out there getting ready to go into the interview process. Those are really helpful to think of, because when that person asks you in the beginning, tell me about yourself. Also, if you're someone out there who's going to go be a guest on a podcast or a show like this great show here, when the person says, tell me about yourself, don't just do the like, well, I was born in a little town in Iowa. That's not what we mean. What's going to get you the most bang for your buck, the most out of your 15 minutes of fame on that show or in that interview, is to tell me a story that helps me understand what you're all about, why you're here, why you're doing this, why you're in front of me. What we don't want is, well, I graduated high school, went to college, I studied this, I did this, and I graduated. That's just chronology. And that's really only interesting if you're a huge celebrity and someone is writing your biography. Otherwise, what we want is memoir. Memoir is when we actually take small little snippets and we say, how do I extract the juice out of this? That's what we're trying to do with these who and why stories, which again, super valuable when you go on podcasts, shows like this, or if you are being interviewed for a new position. Really great ones to know.
It's super important as well, just in an intimate networking space. Case in point, I was at a female networking event, and we were getting ready to go on a hike, and there were a lot of new women that have joined now that the pandemic is officially over. And Fauci said that this morning, by the way. That's not me saying that. Anyway, so we were going around the circle, and everybody was saying, oh, I'm new, and I did this, and I did this. And this woman was started that way, like just same old, same old. And then all of a sudden she said, and I was the only woman to ever do this or something. And she saved that to the very end of her conversation. So when she first opened her mouth, everything was same old. And then at the very, very end, she gave her juicy nugget, and everybody was like, wow, you should have started with that story. Like, we didn't even need to hear any of the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Super important.
And if you have one of those kinds of things, even saying, if that's the thing, if that's the takeaway, then is there anything I need to say before that helps make sense of it? So for example, again, I'm really making this up because I don't know this woman's story at all. But if I was the first one to do something, I might, instead of saying, here's all the things I've done, and then I was the first one to do this, I might say, you know, growing up, I always realized there was this and this and that. And I always struggled with, why couldn't I do it? Why couldn't I do it? So then one day this happened, and I decided to take the bull by the horns, and I became the first person to ever do this. What happened next, you won't believe, you know, like something like that. So that it really is like showing us the contrast. That's one of the Beyond the Basics tips, is show us the contrast between what is versus what was, why it was big versus why versus a small version of it. So that's, again,
I love your natural ability to tell a story. I can see the framework in just the way you just said that. It's beautiful.
It's the pleasure and the curse. If you were married to me, you would be like, stop yelling about the TV, because I'm always having some opinion about the story editing on shows and what should happen. So anyway, okay, third story.
Okay,
so we got the first two, how and why. You've got all those prompts there in that workbook that Catherine has available for you. And then the third one is your where story. The where story is about where we are and where you're taking us. So this is where a case study could come in. This is where your idea of what the world looks like with your product in it. This is what the world looks like with you working in my organization. If I was a leader, then I would use this where story to talk about what I think could happen for your career here, how we would create something together. If I was applying for a sales position somewhere or applying to get promoted, I would talk about where we're headed with me in that role, what I think the future looks like, and why I'm prepared to help achieve that. Versus what typically happens is we talk about why I'm so great, why you need us, why we're wonderful, why our product is great. Instead, help create a world where this is where we are now, this is where we're going, and these are the tools that it's going to take to get there. I have those tools. Our product has those tools. Our company has those tools. That's what we want to hear here, is where we are and where we're going. It's a little bit of like a vision story. Even when I work with organizations to help them redo their visions, the stories of their vision, a lot of times the vision sounds like this gobbledygook, like we envision a world where yada yada yada, and it's like you lost me at the first word, versus telling a vision as an actual story of what would the world look like, floating above the world, being a little bird and describing what you see below. Where are we now and where are we headed? That's the way that I think we can best really set up for the audience where you're trying to take us. And again, whether this is directly to a possible customer that's in front of you, whether it's, you know, in you're pitching your company, wherever the case is, help us see where we are and what is the inevitable future that you are prepared to help us with.
That's super, super good for sales reps, right? If you can get your prospect to see themselves in your future, or to see themselves using your product in the future, then that's a better way to sell.
Yeah. And it allows you a chance here to the fifth story that I'm going to get to after the fourth one in a minute, is these unspoken things, which are objections. And by really having a clear idea of where we are and what the world is going to look like next, where we, like, you can use that a little bit to even say, like, here's where it's headed. Are you prepared for that world? That's why we have these tools for you. You can embed all of the objections inside of that as well. So they start to, whatever they would have been thinking of, like, well, what about this? You include that in there, that they're like, oh, shoot, I was just thinking that kind of thing. So these where stories, these vision stories, which I originally learned way back from this company called Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's this deli. It's just a huge everything. And I learned this idea of visioning from them, of having a really clear idea of, at some point in the future, what things look like. And especially if you could put dates, times, years, you know, in the next 3 years, this is what's going to happen. In 2025, when your customers wake up in the morning, they're going to reach for their phone and a hologram of Whitney Houston is going to sing their song to them. If you could get us to be in that world, you have a much better chance than saying, here's all the stats, figures, and data that support this. Because as soon as we start hearing stats, figures, data, a big, bold statement with no story, we start to say, well, is that true? Have I seen it not be true? He said that 80% of people do that. Am I one of those 80% of people? And you totally lose them because they're worried about defending where they stand versus going with you into that new world and looking around a little bit.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Because think about, like, we don't want to change. You know, we don't want to change. People don't want to change. It takes a lot of calories for our brain to change. It takes a lot of energy to change. There's fear in changing, even if the current world kind of sucks a little bit. If we look around and say, well, this isn't great, there's fear in, well, I don't know what's ahead. At least I know what this looks like. I don't know what's over there. So I'd rather do nothing and live with this than do something and make the wrong choice. So our job in this where story is to help them envision what that could look like, you know, and listing features, listing data, listing facts, listing all the people you've worked with. It's not going to do any of that. It's not going to do any of that. I see this all the time for trainers like me. And you've probably seen it in doing this show and introducing so many people, and in the work you do as well out there coaching and training. We all have many of the same logos in our name. A lot of people have worked with Disney. A lot of people have worked with Bank of America. A lot of people have done this. At this point, that doesn't make us that is a commodity in a way, you know? And so what we have to do is have extra layers upon that. Sure, it's helpful for social proof to say these people have worked with me, but it's only helpful if the audience is saying, I was kind of liking this guy. Has someone else worked with him? And then you hear they have, then you say, okay, cool. I could trust my instincts then. But I don't think leading with that is the right way to go. You know, it's why I always encourage people when giving a presentation, don't do that at the beginning of your presentation. If you're being invited on a show, let the host do it for you, but don't do it yourself. Don't waste the beginning of your sales presentation talking about, you know, who you are, who you've worked with, because I don't care yet. I don't know that they have the same problems as I do, versus enroll me in this problem I have. Tell me a really good story about where things are headed and where things are now. And then I'll say, well, who have you worked with? And as soon as you say someone, I say, okay, good. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
That's kind of the same with people that get stuck on certifications or degrees. You know, they think that they can't do something unless they have said degree. But if they led with the transformation they gave, they helped their clients get, and what they did, then people don't even ask. They don't even want to know. They just
Right.
want that transformation. They want the same outcome that you just provided for somebody else. And
Yeah.
that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah. And they want the person who can most clearly describe to me my problem in the way that I think about it, not to convince me, not to persuade me that I have a problem, not to do any of that, but the person that really can lay out a picture of what's going on with me and then really clearly talk about where we're headed, I'm going to follow that person. I'm going to go with that person. You know, that's what we're looking for, I think, in more of these presentations and more of our sales conversations. I had this really early on with I used to be a wine trainer and a wine buyer and then a wine educator in
And
my
now
in
I'm
my
just a wine drinker.
and now I'm just a wine drinker and collector. And so one of the things I heard one of my mentors tell me very early on is that in your, not necessarily as a sommelier at the table, but in a wine buying where I'm selling wine to a restaurant group or something, they should leave the sales presentation not feeling like they had a sales presentation, but feeling like they learned something, that they understand the market better, that they understand what consumers are wanting, not with a bunch of data about the soil in Spain and how the water trickles down the hill and this wine is delicious, but about what consumers are going to be looking for in 3 months and why these kinds of bottles could put that restaurant at the forefront of that. They should
Mm-hmm.
leave with that kind of education. And I think great salespeople understand how to tell those kinds of stories about where we're headed and where we are so that their prospects leave and say, wow, I just got a TED talk and now I know some stuff I didn't. What else can this person help me do? That's the sweet
Yes.
spot.
And it also shows with the entrepreneur or the salesperson if they truly know their target market. A lot of people want to skip past that whole market research and understanding and social listening and having
Right.
conversations with the people that they're going to be working with. uh, Always, conversion copywriters that are really good, that's the copy that you read that you're like, how did they know? How did they know how I was feeling? Just what you said. So
Right.
I'm just going to encourage the audience to make sure, right? All these things that Mike's talking about, make sure you know exactly who you're talking to so that you can be able to lace them through your story, because it would sure be bad to show up with this beautiful story and it's not even about them whatsoever,
Yeah.
right? They
This has
can't even
been
see it.
And this has been the value for me in being inside of Facebook groups, in LinkedIn groups, in those
Hmm.
communities, is watching and listening to what they're saying, not to be there to be like, would you like my stuff? I've got a new thing for sale. I just never do that because I think it's tacky, because it's not my house. It's someone else's house. I shouldn't go in there and
Yes.
do that. But I
Yes.
listen and I hear, what are they saying when people talk about when the COVID kind of business shutdowns first started in early 2020, I was getting ready to launch a thing where people would work with me for 3 months. And then at the end, they come to LA and we shoot a speaker reel for them. Well, that didn't happen because they couldn't come to LA. We couldn't do any of that. And so I was like, well, I don't even know. How do I have a business teaching presentation skills? I was going through and I was working with individuals and I was working with companies. I was going in and teaching executives and sales reps how to use storytelling, how to be more present and have stage presence in front of people, how to unlock what was unique about them so they could really connect. And all of a sudden it was like, well, you can't be with people anymore. So what are you going to do? And so I started listening to people. I started hearing what their issues were. I started listening to sales leaders who were talking about, wow, my number one salesperson who could just charm the pants. That's a horrible thing to say. Who could charm the credit cards out of anyone's pocket to sign up for our product. They are horrible on camera because they are just so used to feeling and seeing someone. And I started listening. I said, ooh, that's what we need. And I launched a brand new course. I launched a whole platform. I reached out to previous clients to say, hey, I've heard from a bunch of people this is going on. Here's a little, I made a couple of videos to send out. I did a couple of worksheets. Here's some
Hmm.
helpful tips for your team, by the way. And I'm offering this if you want a workshop, but here's a bunch of stuff to help your team. And I booked my 2020. I lost almost no revenue because
Oh
I
my goodness.
listened to what they were saying in groups, and I listened to the VPs of sales. I listened to all of those kinds of ideas out there to say, okay, let me use their language when I talk back. When I put my stories together, let me do that. And I shared stories about when I first had to get on camera, when I first had to start talking to people, when I had a job to host something and had to have a relationship with this inanimate object. And it was the language they were using, that their teams felt lackluster, that they felt dry, that they felt bored, that they felt all of those things. And it
I
really worked.
sit at night and I do the same thing. I read what the trouble. I screenshot
Yes.
so much in the middle of the night, but the voice of customer data is so important.
So
It's so
important.
important for speaking and for everything that we do. And I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to give Jennifer a shout out. Thank you. Great points, Mike. Thank you so much for the solid
Thanks,
content.
J-Mac.
So yes, you guys can, and bring your questions. Keep going. So I didn't want to interrupt you.
And it's a really interesting thing that so many organizations don't do. I worked with a company where they had, they didn't want me to work with their sales team. I was working with their CS team on finding more stories, pulling more stories out. And so then I said, well, hey, great that you're having your CS, because their customer experience team also like upsold things. Like once a client was in, they would offer them other solutions. They would try to stop people from terminating. It's like a SaaS company. So they would stop people from terminating. So they wanted to use those kinds of stories. And part of what I had them do was they needed to be able to pull the stories out from customers as well. They needed a logging system. And we were done with that engagement. And I said, hey, by the way, I would love an introduction to your VP of sales, because all of this work that the CS team is doing, they could be using the real words, the real ideas from your current customers, not only to tell like glossy testimonials, but to talk about the challenges in a way that maybe they wouldn't hear from prospects. And it really is a goldmine. This idea that you shared with us here about really listening, such a goldmine. You're right.
Yes.
You're right. Okay.
For sure.
Fourth story is the how story. This is the value story. Okay. So when a sales rep is telling me, we believe in this and we treat our customers this way, we automatically, call it what you want, call it wise or call it skeptical. I don't know which it is, but we in 2022 are a little bit skeptical when we hear people say customers are 100% our priority and those kinds of things, because we just have felt so much of that not happen from other people who've promised that. If you've ever flown on an airline, you realize the difference between how they say they want to treat customers and how they treat most of us. We've all been there. Same thing with a lot of dining experiences and things like that. So when we think about the how stories, what we want to think about is how things happen around here. And those are your value stories. So anywhere, look at your sales conversations, look at your sales decks, look at your onboarding documents for new hires or for people going through your interview process, and think about where are the places where I make some kind of assertion about how we are. And then figure out a recent story that highlights that. Figure out a time where you didn't do that and you realize that was the missing link. And then you did do it, by the way, which is called the anti-hero story. We actually did screw up and it was costing us a lot. We realized the missing link. And since that day, we have been dedicated to doing this thing differently, which is why you can trust us to do X, Y, and Z for you. So those are the how stories. Those are the values stories.
I like that. And I'd really like to think about, so you've worked with some of the larger brands, larger logos, if you will. I'm wondering if the smaller companies are even taking the time to do that.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you the big ones aren't either. So I don't know that, in this case, size doesn't matter. We're talking about this because they don't either. They just have them plastered on the wall and in the books for people to memorize. But really being able to talk about how those values come into play, you don't see it a lot.
Or even linking down, right, their vision, mission, and the culture of the company, and then what they're saying to their customers. Like, do those even jive? Or, a lot of people feel it's not even important. I don't need a mission. I don't need a vision. Just go sell. I don't need. It's not a top-down thing. It's just you go bring in more numbers for us, and we'll talk about it. So that's really interesting for people to consider when building their culture, and especially today in the Great Resignation, and when consumers are so educated and they really have a choice of understanding, and the younger generation is digging and they want to know. Are you environmentally conscious? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? How are you treating your employees? Are you on Glassdoor? I mean, they are doing their research to find out. They have a choice now of where they land.
Yeah. And these are even the kinds of stories that if an organization is putting out social media content, if they've got YouTube channel, these are the kinds of things we should be talking about. Not one thing that says, here's our values, but like videos all the time that are showing your values in action. And if you can't think of a time yesterday that your value happened, then it probably isn't something you value. If you can't think of a time where you were challenged to do something, then it's not a value, it's table stakes. For example, saying like, we value not, throwing babies out the window. That's not a value. That's a table stakes for being a good citizen. When is a value is something where it could be challenged and you would have to really fight to do the right thing. So even the idea of like, we put customers first, do you always? Tell me about that. Tell me what that really means. Show me what that looks like. So that's what we need, these kinds of 4 stories. If in your pitch, in your presentation, in your sales conversations, you are talking about your values, I promise you they're falling on deaf ears if you're not doing it this way.
Super good points. Super, super good points.
And the last one, these are the unspoken thoughts. I always say, this is the tell me a story about me that I haven't told you yet. That's what your prospect is saying at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And these unspoken thoughts are their objections. It's their hidden want that they haven't addressed. A lot of times in a sales presentation, a sales conversation, we'll talk about something like, oh, we are, I know that as a marketing leader in your organization, you care about data being available at the press of a button. Sure. Yeah, I get it. But you know what else they care about? Being seen as innovative, not screwing up, not making a bad decision, being the person their team can rely on, being the person who is ready for promotion with their leadership because they brought a brand new tool in that saved the day. So how can you address those unspoken stories that they may not say to you, that they may not ask you, and that are probably not put into your marketing materials from your team for you, but that you could learn? If I was doing obviously sometimes if we're doing high turn, lower cost items, we don't have the ability to do this research. But if I was doing mid higher tier ticket items, I would 100% be watching this person's LinkedIn. I'd be seeing, what are they up to? What might they care about? What have I seen them share? What have I seen them like? Who have I seen them talk to? If there's someone who's constantly out there in media, okay, I get that this is important to them to be perceived this way. So what are the unspoken thoughts, the maybe objections they have, or the unspoken dreams that they're not going to tell you, but if you can tap into, they're going to look at you and be like, how does he know that about me? Or that they could say, well, I mean, that wasn't something that mattered to me, but it would be a great bonus. So thank you for mentioning it. All of those things are really critical. And they're also critical in hiring situations. If you're a sales leader trying to bring people into your organization, being able to understand their unspoken thoughts and addressing them for them,
Yes.
really helpful.
It's important also for sales leaders to understand how to motivate their team. You
Absolutely.
can't just assume that they're motivated just by some crazy cruise that you're going to get where you have to go on a cruise with the CEO of the company. I don't know how many people want to pack their bags to do that when they have to be on their best behavior when they're being given an award.
Yeah.
Right?
Or somebody with a toddler. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds awful to me right now of like, I don't want to go on this. I don't want to do that. Like, I would just like a week in my house without something to do. So it really is an interesting thing to say, like, you clearly don't understand your audience and you want points for giving them a reward, but it's actually not a reward for anybody.
When you work with clients, what are some of the ways that you help them uncover that data?
The unspoken stories.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is through the customer data. So people that have already come in, people who are leaving, maybe, what are the things they said then that they didn't say at the beginning? Well, what I was really looking for, I was working with a client where we saw over and over and over, they were a marketing data company that would work with, other groups to help them pull and mine and look at their data. And over and over and over, what we heard in several of them was that the information wasn't really easy for the marketing leader in the organization to turn around and like share the content. So we heard over and over, like, oh, what's important to them is being able to rapidly pull something up and say, oh, you need that right now. Let me get it for you, so that they could look like they knew what was going on in the meeting, that they could be that way. So that's one example of finding it through customer data. Another is looking through looking through if there are product reviews, if that's something you have, really looking through that and seeing what were people disappointed by, not what people are ranting about. If they're people who just hate you, then whatever, they're not your people. But people who, like, I always used to say when I used to run a restaurant company, and I would say, let's really think about the threes on a scale of 1 to 5, like in Yelp. What did the threes say? Because they thought you were almost like really great. What did the
Almost,
fours say?
yeah.
The people who are ones, they either had a really bad experience that hopefully is atypical, or they're just people who like they're not your people. But what did the threes say who were like, I wanted to love you, I was almost there? What were they looking for that
And
wasn't in it?
they say that in those reviews. I do
They give it to you.
I do a lot of data mining on Amazon, and people will say, and restaurants as well, and they'll say, I wanted to give you a 5-star so bad, but when
Yeah. It's right there out in the open,
Yeah.
waiting for us
Yeah.
to pull in. And then the third way, so customer data, looking at like feedback that we've gotten from them, whether they're frustrated. And then the third way is to really look outside of what else are they doing. So again, where are they at in their career? If I am a CMO in a company, I want very different things than if you're reaching out to a director of marketing. I want very different career things. And what I won't say to you in the sales presentation is, hey, I'm a director of marketing. Yes, I want you to solve my problem in the business, but I also really need this to be a win for me. So really looking and saying, who is this person? What might they be looking for next? What do they want? And is there a way that this product helps them get there that I can weave into the story without having to say, I know you're looking for a chance to be promoted and wow, the CEO. How can you weave that in? How can you find the right case studies to share that also highlight that?
Yes. And as newer sales representatives, we want to address you to that's strategically thinking.
Yeah.
Really, and it's really doing there's some cliche words, a 360 view or whatever you're doing. Who's your champion? Who's going to be your roadblock? Who do you want to make look good? So really assessing when you're doing a complicated, larger, long-term sell, who are all the different players and what do you need to do for each of those players to make them look good? Because you ultimately want a whole 10 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
If there's just that one person that's going to block the sale and you got 9 others, then that you can't please all the people all the time, but at least you understood and identified who the blocker was going to be in your sale.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And really understanding, how do I give, in the case where maybe you don't have that person in the room, this is another benefit of this kind of storytelling, is the person who has to go, be your champion to the rest of the team who you don't get to meet with. If we give them stories, it makes them easier to remember. It makes them easier to say, I really loved when I met with Catherine, I learned this whole thing. It was really interesting. She was telling me about how in 2015, blah, 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 blah. It's so much easier to remember than a bunch of data. And you have a better chance of your champion being able to go back and kind of pitch the idea for you, or at least get you a meeting in front of the people you need to convince. And that's
I love that. Yeah.
one of the overlooked things here, is that these stories are easier to remember. So let's make it easier for people to go forward and champion bringing us in.
Yes, love that. There's so many ways to apply it. So many. I mean, my mind's just going like crazy. Like referrals. Somebody wants to refer you, give them an easy way to do it.
Yeah.
Not like something very simple where they can
Yeah.
repeat it. Super, super good.
One of the things too I learned from I can't remember who now. I would love to give them credit, from a friend, is that with the referral process of always going back to the person who referred you and say, hey, thank you so much for the referral. I love to hear, what did so and so say that made you think of me? I get so much data. I get conversion copy from that. What were they talking about that made them come to me? That made you say, "Ooh, you need Mike." What was it? What did they say? It's really, really helpful. And a lot of times we just take the referral. We say, "Thank you so much." Send them a cookie. Send them a bottle of wine, and move on. But there's so much data, so much story data we could be pulling from that.
Yes, it's also good for looking back on your customers to find out your unique value prop, what you thought it was, but really how you showed up and what they say could totally, totally be different, right?
Yeah.
You may have to change your whole messaging if you go back and do some data mining with like the last 5 to 10 customers that you served.
Yeah. I mean, in my case too, like one of the things that people would never say to me if I asked them is, I really want people to look at me like when I'm teaching in the mic drop method, which is my group coaching around public speaking and presentation. What people will not say to me if I ask them directly is they won't say, I want people to think I was the best speaker that day. I want to nail it. They won't say that because it feels egotistical. It feels like they're shining too much light. What I hear over and over from referrals is, this person is really looking for that mic drop moment. They're really looking for that. That was really helpful to me because I could put it in my copy. And so I could put it in my copy, not saying, hey, you greedy little beast, I know you want to shine on the stage so you can be everyone's favorite speaker that day, but I can weave it into the copy. And it's something that my customers almost never will say for themselves, even though they really want it. It's one of those unspoken stories.
Well, you're really good at understanding your target market. So before we wrap the show, I did put the link to the book, to the download, you guys. So tell us, you just mentioned you have a framework. You tell me all the different ways people can get in touch with you. How are you monetizing today? Who's your perfect customer? Anything that's up on the horizon that you're launching. Let's give a little shout out to some of those things that we can support you with.
Yeah, there's really three. I have like three really simple things I work with people. I've got the mic drop method, which is all about it's a group coaching / it's private as well. There's one-on-one time, group time, mastermind. It's all of that stuff. And that's really aimed at people who either want to become public speakers or who have to speak frequently for their job. So I've worked with executives, or I've worked with leaders in marketing or sales who part of their job is going out and speaking on behalf of their company. They're inside of that program. Public speakers, authors, they're inside of that program. Entrepreneurs and coaches. So people that are using speaking, not to say, I want to be a little less nervous, but to say, I really want to shine. I've got opportunities to be in front of people, and I want to really make the most of those. Yes. So those people are inside of the mic drop method, where we work together for 6 months. And then I've got the director's cut, which is one-on-one work. This is the VIP day. This is where I work with executives, people who are probably already speaking a lot, or the stakes are a little bit higher. And because it's a higher ticket offering. And so we work together in a smaller container to really help them get to that next place, maybe get ready for TV, a big interview, something like that. And then the third way is people bring me in to work with their teams. So I'll go in and I'll work with sales organizations. A lot of times it's sales or it's executive teams. I'll do retreats for executives around storytelling, organizational storytelling, leadership storytelling. I will do work with them on these 5 stories. How do we find what our mission is and who we are and what we're about? And how do we put it together to tell it? Or I'll come in and work with their sales teams directly. And we'll get together and do workshops around storytelling, really helping people not only figure out how to put those stories together, but then how to change them, how to weave them, how to store them, and ultimately how to get on a camera or get in front of someone and deliver them in a way that the stories really shine.
Those sound fun. It sounds like that the sales rep would enjoy it as well. It's not boring again, graphs and charts and role plays. And, back in the day, we had so many of those trainings. It was crazy. But to actually get now, oh my gosh, you can get together. We can get together and do it. But also, I'm sure the sales teams are embracing that everybody can do things virtually. So are you giving those virtually or in person?
Yeah, I've done so many virtually. Okay. A lot of the in-person stuff for those kinds of things, there's in-person events coming back, like associations and things. Yes. But like company workshops are really slow to come back to in-person right now. I think companies are still kind of like slowly evolving, slowly thinking about what that looks like. And in some cases saying, actually, this isn't that important to us. Let's do virtual options, which in some way work nicely because we can divide it up over a couple of days versus one day. Because there's, when people fly me in, there's a sunken cost of I'm in town. So let's work together for 8 hours. But nobody, and this from being in so many sales workshops, nobody changes that much in 8-hour day. And so in virtual, we can kind of break it up into these multiple sessions with time in between. So people can really not only figure out the story side, but really master the 5 languages you need to be able to speak and to share. And so it's about not only the content, but also who are you being? And it gives them a little chance to work on some of those things. So it's been fun to do the virtual version and really say, because somebody initially came and said, oh, will you do virtual? We'll do 7 hours. And I was like, I think that's horrible for your people. I think that's a horrible idea. And here's what I would suggest instead. And we were able to break it up into the different chunks, building on it. We were able to get them into small groups in between. I was able to create I created a whole training for managers as well. So when people work with me to do storytelling for their teams, then the managers also get this separate track where they're getting extra information of what can you do this week to help your team with that. Here's what we just learned. What should you talk about in your meeting? What should you look for in your team to reward them for? And it's really, I think, made a huge difference for people to have that extra. Okay, so what do the managers do to support the training?
For sure, because I think managers a lot are overlooked. And the only thing they're handed is how to be a better manager and how to drive more numbers or something. So,
and then we waste all this money spending thousands of dollars bringing in trainers, and we don't spend any time to say to the managers, hey, our best bet, yes, the training was great and we needed that push, we needed that education, but our best bet is if the managers can actually help us get that training to sink in so it doesn't just go away in a day. And so I really thought it was important to arm managers with that tool set.
For sure. All right. So here's a shameless plug you can do. Is there any one big company that you'd love to work with? Because we have lots of viewers.
I would love to work with Spotify. I think that there's a lot, don't at me everybody if you're mad about Spotify, but I really think that there's some interesting things going on there. I think as an organization, it's interesting. And I don't know, maybe I can help them figure out the mess they were in and how they could have better handled that. So I think that would be really fun to work with them.
Okay, you guys. So anybody that has connections, Mike's contacts in there. Let's help them, because that's what we do, right? We help each other. That's the community. That's what we do to help people. All right, so I'm going to wrap the show. Mike, hold on for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Art of Inspired Selling. Thank you for dealing with my just tiny little technical issues. But you know what? The show must go on, and I had a fabulous speaker to help that go on. So what's going on with Social Selling Agency? I'm getting ready to launch. We're talking about speakers. I'm launching right now a group training program to help entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. This new name I just learned, parallel entrepreneurs. Have you heard that? It's kind of
I haven't heard that.
Me neither. It's a side hustler, and speakers. To be able to build your online press kit. Great. The reason that that's really valuable is how many times are you going to go guest on a podcast, or you've been asked to speak in somebody's group and you rewrite your bio each time before you send it off, or you're just not ready, what to say. So we're bringing together this 4-week group training course so that you can build your online press kit, so you can take control of how you manage your media and you don't let somebody else tell your story. So we'll be dropping all that information shortly with the sales page for that, so you can sign up for it. All right, so take care, you guys. We will see you soon. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on, and reach out, you guys, if you have any questions.